Welcome to the Node.js Node API team meeting for March 14th, 2025. We'll follow our standard approach of going through the things we've identified in the team project. Before we do that, anybody have any announcements or news they'd like to share? Okay, I see a bunch of shaking heads, so let me share the screen. Okay, so we can start with things that are in the done column, just to see if there's anything here that people think we should mention or highlight. I think Chenzong, it was you who went through, you fixed up the matrices and stuff, which is great.
Oh yeah, I think it was landed right.
Yeah, these look like they're merged and landed. So.
Cool.
Okay, so nothing in done. Has PR. Don't know if we've heard any. I haven't heard anything from Gabriel on this one. I see. So I don't think we have an update there, but still sort of moving along. Anything in sort of the in progress thing, these things that we should chat about?
I just kind of trying to get back to this embedding API.
Yep.
And I have a question. So do you see this embedding API to be node.js specific, or we want it to be designed to be reused across different, potentially across different runtimes and engines? What do you guys think?
I think like in the perfect world, since we're using Node API to like types and all that, if it can be generic, that would be good, right? Because everything so far, well, I guess like our JS API is fully generic because it's more TC30 or like on the ECMAScript based. We do have like the Node API parts, which are more node specific, but I would still go with like if it can be generic, that's better. I see Chenzong has his hand up though, so go for it.
Yeah, I just want to say the same as yours, that the Node API stuff is not specific to Node. It's just that they provide some helpful functions to interact with these threads. But I think the get UV loop API is a different thing because I think we have said that that should be considered legacy. And people should avoid, but it depends on that because Libreview doesn't provide any API guarantee.
Yep.
And apart from that, I think Node.js pod has been trying to keep as generic as possible.
Right. There are implementations in the other runtimes. So I think it's almost like, the JS API is JavaScript agnostic, and then the Node API is like the backend JavaScript pieces. We just called it Node API since, we're in the Node project.
Yeah, I kind of look at it. I would rather say like JS native API is more like for JavaScript engines, whereas like Node API is more like for runtimes, like because it's a kind of way we introduce concept of controlling the process, concept of threads, and concepts of plugins, add-ons. So typically JavaScript engine itself, like say V8, does not have plugins, right? But if you have
Right.
runtime, you want to have plugins. It's what.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so technically, I'm thinking, like, pretty much in this Node embedding API, what's maybe considered to be Node.js specific, we have like different, feel like flags for platform and runtime, which kind of tweaking behavior. So my question is like, would it make sense to convert these flags to rather kind of string-based kind of options? Like we already have kind of command line arguments which we're passing in for parsing anyway. So would it make sense also kind of remove all these kind of enums which look like maybe like node specific, but rather kind of replace them just with some string-based.
Are they node specific, or like are they concepts that other runtimes could use and the name is just node specific or something, right? That like some of the concepts I could see being similar, and I could see some others being maybe more specific.
Right, like some of them specific to Node seems to be specific, some not.
Right.
So that's what I propose. Like if we want to be not necessarily Node specific, maybe we can keep whatever enums, enum or kind of items to be kind of node agnostic, and then we have indicate node specific would go like through parsed arguments.
Yeah, that it definitely makes sense, I think, to try and make it like, hey, here, these are a set which are common concepts that any runtime could implement. And then here's a set which are like, how would you also provide platform specific, like, runtime specific arguments? Like, I'm not sure if the like doing that necessarily through strings or whatever, like is I'd have to think more if that's like the ideal way to do that, but like making it so you could do those two things, because I can see the case where it's like, okay, I've written my application and as long as I provide the general ones, then if I move to another runtime, I can make no changes at all. But I understand that if I use these other platform specific ones, those are ones that like some other one will probably error out and I would have to make, changes to my code.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to jump to a specific case that in your pull request that I shared a link in the chat. For example, node embedding runtime flags on inspect. I think this will be probably a node.js specific thing, and much all I think pretty much all other inspector related would be very React specific, because I don't think any engines would be able to share their inspector implementations as far as I can tell. And yeah, something like that. So I really think that these enums should be reviewed case by case. And I found some of them might be useful to be listed in enum, like
Am I looking at the right, like I clicked your link, but am I looking at the right
yeah, would you mind navigate to node embedding API.h?
this one? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And load the div. It's too large to be presented by GitHub by default.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Click on that.
It's
Not this
the
one.
one above.
Oh,
Previous
sorry.
one.
Yeah, it's the
This
one
one. Yeah.
above.
Okay.
Yeah, it's one. A little bit of scroll down. Yeah, I think this is the part of enum declarations. I can find a lot of these enums were Node.js specific behaviors.
Yeah, inspector would be probably useful everywhere.
Yeah, I know it's useful, but I mean, how would we expect to share the implementation? Because and I haven't put much time to investigate how common it will be. But at least I know that their protocols are pretty much different.
Right. Yeah, currently working on also kind of on Hermes side, and I was like looking to what's applicable there, not.
Does Hermes implement the Chrome DevTools protocol?
Yes, they also do CDB
That's good
protocol.
to know. Yeah, I think what I meant is that at least like other major browsers like SpiderMonkey, with JavaScript engine or WebKit do not implement Chrome Delta's protocol. So, and how they would like to bootstrap are likely to be different. I didn't spend time to investigate how different they will be, but I assume that they are different. So, and this particular runtime on inspector is Node.js specific implementation on the worker support of inspector, because each workers might have their own inspector instance, and in process they are different because for a single web page they share inspector instance between the workers thread and the main renderer JavaScript instance. So this is different from Node.js and the process. I would assume that this flags might be a little bit specific to Node.js. But yeah, I mean, we probably need to review this enums case by case to see if it's really need to be exposed in enum instead of a like string flag.
The other thing could be like, do we need to expose all these flags? Like, how important is it that in, say, the inspector, if we think the inspector is very node specific, like in the first versions, what if that just wasn't exposed, right? Like when we only expose like we could go through and say like these were comfortable or generic. Any runtime is going to have some way of honoring or not honoring this flag, and we just limit the flags to that, right? Like, would that exclude anything that's really important? If not, maybe it's easier to start with a smaller set, right?
Yeah, to introduce them on demand lately. Because at this point, what I've done, I just simply copied whatever we have for C++
Yeah,
and API, and without actually giving any deep thought to these flags. But as we kind of talking about maybe designing some kind of API which can be potentially reused across multiple runtimes, maybe it's better to kind of reduce the set to
It's
some
easier
point.
yeah,
to add than it is to remove. So
yeah. I agree that we should start with a minimum necessary set of flags to be exposed at the beginning, like what we did with Node API functions. We didn't expose all at once at the beginning, and we just iterated over the time and the and what people requested.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, makes sense. Okay, it's kind of aligned with what I'm thinking. It's I appreciate your feedback.
okay. Any of these other in progress ones we want to dive into a little bit? Okay, if not, I guess similarly on the to-dos, these are like we haven't necessarily started. So unless somebody has some info. This one, though, I think there was a PR that landed. No, come on. Okay, there we go. Right. So, and I think that PR landed. So, okay. So I think we can say closing as PR to address. I don't have anything for the other, so let's move on to need triage. Okay, so we have add Clang CL to the CI.
Yeah, I added this last week, and I just added here for asking if you have any no if you have any memories on the how did we evaluate the sorry, let me rephrase that, because when we migrate from the MSVC compiler on the Windows, we probably would want the add-ons to be compiled as clamshell as possible. But even though they are compatible, as far as I can tell from the clamshell document, but I mean, how hard it will be to ask add-on to compile with clamshell in their toolchain. And
My key question when I saw this was, and I think you said no, but let's dive into that, is like existing add-ons. So I've compiled my add-on and it's today used whatever it uses today. And that add-on, which is a binary, like, because I know there's a bunch of a bunch of package authors who say, like, I'm going to provide one binary and here it is. Well, the fact that node 24 uses Clang to compile the Windows node and uses GCC to compile the 22 one affect the ABI stability where, like, yeah, I know your existing one that was compiled with something like, will it still work with both of those is the question. That's the key question in my mind. Like, is there a potential stability break here because of this?
For
yeah,
Node API, it should not be an issue, but for they're like for none and other kind of C++ APIs, like V8 API directly access from
yeah.
Node
I
modules.
think Node API is a special case because we only expose C APIs, and that's the part that was stable in Clancyl compatibility.
Yep.
But from the Clancyl document, I can find that they say the C++ API part is not stable as we should assume.
Yep.
So I think if people were building their add-on with NAND or C++ API directly, I think they will be affected.
Right. Okay. But I think that's in line with the expectations, right? Like if you're using NAN or the C++ API directly, if you try and use something compiled with an older version of Node, it's actually going to say, sorry, the version, like the runtime version or whatever that, I forget what the name of the thing is. It'll say, that doesn't match. This isn't going to run. You have to recompile. Um, and for Node API, it should be like, nope, you run anyway. So that's the first thing. It sounds like we don't think there's any like Node API issue in terms of compatibility, right? So I guess then your question is like having Node now compiled with Clang instead of VS Code, how easy is it for people to switch their add-ons to use Clang instead of VS Code? Possibly for the case where like I've installed Clang because I need to that for Node, but actually maybe that's not typical. Like, I mean, normally you wouldn't install Clang because Node is installed with Clang. You install a compiler because your add-ons are compiled need something, right?
Yeah. Would you mind scroll down a little bit
Yeah.
and of the thread that Joey was asking that
Okay.
if we can provide any assistance on investigating the ecosystem and how can we help to migrate?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Is there some kind of list of popular projects? Okay. So it's around so if we go back then let's open GitHub. We can go to say issues, closed issues, and see how far back we go here. So let's just see packages. Trying to see if this repo would have the. I'm sure there was some cases where we said like, well, let's look at NPM like modules that would be interesting, but let's see, go to the very end if we can.
Is it in this repo? I recall that we have another repo called ABI stable node where we document all the
Right,
ecosystem.
okay, sorry. I always get the wrong one. So ABI stable node, which is the one
Yeah.
that's the one I'm thinking I was looking in. So if we look at issues, closed, and right, this goes far back. So ABI stable module ports, there's just a few in here. Here. So this has got like, some of the assessment that we did in terms of,
Yeah, maybe we should link to this thread and perform the same analysis when we
yeah,
migrate to clients here.
yeah, that's a good idea. From the discussion today, this is
You miss the space of the discussion.
from the discussion, right? Okay, that one, let's just continue to look to see if there's any others that look. That was 22, so keep going up. I'm just looking to see, and then maybe exit. Criteria. Okay, that didn't have too many lists. So I guess that particular issue is probably the best one that I found from searching through there. I think we'd need to like then exclude um Like exclude ones that are already converted to Node API because they shouldn't be an issue, right? Yeah, it's got some. Here, okay. So maybe that's okay, actually this directory seems to be so let me go back to code, data. Okay, and actually this directory, okay, so this directory so it includes um, okay. So I think those two are probably the best we can come up with.
It also has instructions how to regenerate more modern data. I think it's great.
Yeah, so I think that's like those two, it's basically like we could think, people could go run that again and figure out a new list, right?
I wonder if we need to update this data here.
I think it was interesting because we wanted to know which ones needed to be moved over. Like from the Node API perspective, I'm not sure that's as important anymore. But I could see from that, the Clang perspective, it might be an interesting. You'd almost want to like update it though to say like get this list and have it as like, well, which ones are not Node API implemented, right? Because those are the only ones you really need to worry about. It'd still be interesting to me to like know, okay, well, what are the top ones that haven't converted over to Node API yet, right? But
Mm.
it is an interesting, like, is there some feeling that people will now like for add-ons, it almost complicates like, for the not for the case where you're going to dynamically compile instead of being a precompiled binary, it means as a user, I might have to install both Visual Studio and Clang because some module authors might choose one, some might choose the other. Although maybe that's the same today. Like if you can compile using either, maybe it doesn't actually change anything like as long as there's no incompatibility. Although I guess no, that's not true, right? Like if they're using C++, those ones. Like, is it that if you're using the C++ API, you're going to have to switch from Visual Studio to Clang to make it keep working, or is it just it needs a recompile?
I'm
I
not, I'm not
think
sure about it because Clang CL the claim to kind of adhere to the same C++ calling conventions. The biggest issue what I saw is about using standard library because technically layout of standard library classes is different between Clang and Microsoft compilers. So it's but we if we're using even V8, V8 does not expose any standard classes. So technically, I would say it's very low risk. Oh, actually, I take it back. There are few cases inside of V8 API which use standard library.
Well, I
Okay.
recall there was a case that VA is not compatible. Well, there was a compatibility issue in V8 about MSVC and Cleansale. Maybe I can find the link.
Yeah, there are, for example, cases that we use in, for example, external buffers, and for external buffers, they're using some standard library memory stuff. I believe they may have some compatibility issues there. Yeah, there are a few new V8 APIs which use in standard library. These APIs will have issues.
Okay. From your comment here, Legendikas, like, does it sound like anybody who's using CMake.js today to build a Node API add-on is already using Clang instead of Visual Studio VS Code?
I think the issue is that CMake.js only supports Clang on Unix, but here we need it to support on Windows.
Right. Okay.
And for Node.js, I think it should be compatible because it uses JIP under the way.
Okay. It was more about if people wanted to use CMake.js, they won't be able to do that on Windows. So you could write a add-on which will now yeah, which would only run on one. Although that might be the same today, because like we do have some, maybe it's not CMake.js, but we definitely have like some instructions on how to use CMake instead of Node.js, right?
I think it is linking the Node.js stuff.
Is it concerning Node API? Because Node API should not be different. And I can imagine that some people imagine that they creating some kind of module, but this module in turn is using a bunch of other libraries. So they may have some dependencies on MSVC libraries. So especially if people use Node APIs, they not necessarily have to switch to Clang. They may want to continue to use MSVC.
Right. Yeah,
For different reasons. And
right.
being ABI safe, we're saying it's no issue.
Yeah. Uh,
Okay, so is there anything more we should discuss on this one or before we move on to the other ones?
no, I don't have any.
No. Okay. Yeah, thanks for adding it. That was an interesting one. Should we leave it on the agenda as it needs triage, or having discussed it, should we remove it now?
We can wait another week to see if there's anything we should do.
Okay, sounds great. Okay, so test increased change in bytes for net page. Okay, this one is
This one is a issue when people trying to port Node API to WebKit, and they found that JavaScript core ignores small deltas when we adjusting external memory, which is a purely a guidance on the
right. Yeah.
GC decisions, and it
Yeah.
should not affect how JavaScript runs. So I think if JavaScript core just ignores small deltas and there are some noticeable differences, it should be fixed in the adapter layer between the Node API and JavaScript core, so that there should be no observable differences from the Node API users.
Right. Like I can, so if I understand correctly, the test may be failing on other platforms because we're just making a really small change, right? As opposed to this.
Yeah.
I have no problem with making it bigger, like although, so is it that the adjusted value they're not returning one, they're returning something else?
I don't think they linked it to their implementation of Node API over WebKit. But I mean, the point here is that we can definitely change this test. It's just that we can't control the code out there that could invoke in this function with very small size.
Right. And what I'm wondering is like, how is this failing? Like, why is this failing? Is it that, like, is it basically throwing an error if it's a small value?
I don't think they mentioned it's failing. It's just that JavaScript code just silently ignores the value.
But what I don't see is how do we tell that in the test?
I think we don't expose any method to observe what's happening inside the JavaScript engine regarding the external
Right.
memory.
So, right. So it's like, how is this is do you see this test failing? Right? Like, because we get this add adjusted value, but what I don't see is code which checks it. Oh, no. Okay. So it returns the adjusted value. No, but it returns that adjusted value. And we could look at the JavaScript side of things. Adjusted value. So, okay, I need to find the corresponding. We go to, sorry. My mouse is not walking. There we go. Okay. There's like an add-on. This is in. What's that? In test.js native. Okay, test.js native API. Test general. Oh, no, I don't want that. I want test. I want the test general, maybe just test. Adjust. Right. So this basically says it'll return something greater than 0. And if we look in node.js API doc, adjust. See, I can see their point that like based on this, what we always say is like, you tell us how much you want it to change, we give you how much it changed. Um, that can be zero, right? Like an underlying implementation can choose to adjust, always return zero. Like, no, I don't actually allow you to adjust anything. You can ask, but I'm not going to do it. Um, so our test, like, basically is specific to like we know that if we ask V8 to adjust it by one, it will return something greater than zero. But I think it's perfectly fair for other runtimes to just ignore that and say, well, I'm not adjusting one. You got to give me more. So I think I'm kind of would be okay with changing the test because like it doesn't break the contract. Like we're not changing. Currently, what we're testing is fails on a runtime where it's legal behavior. If you know what I mean. Does that make sense to people?
In that case, we need to update the document, right?
We need to what?
Update the document to say that the return value can be smaller than what's requested.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to add in. Like, I'm happy to submit a PR to say, note that the adjusted value does not have to match the change in bytes, right?
But to be honest, I'm not sure how this, I mean, what if the value is smaller than the requested, but even if it's smaller, there's no observable differences. How the add-on should be expected to react to such case.
Yeah, you could argue that the adjusted value doesn't really help. This is kind of an informational, and we've even said, yeah, we should update. I can, yeah, we should remove this V8, right? Basically gives the runtime an indication the external mounter this is kept alive, right? And we should basically say like not all, you know, not it's like information that's given to the runtime in the GC, but like there's no actual guarantee that it was going to be acted on.
Well,
I,
to be,
I pers- sorry.
yeah, actually, V8 may return a different value. I took a
Right,
quick look into V8 source code, so we should probably indicate that.
right.
Please go ahead, Vladimir.
I just want to tell it I was not able to implement this function on Hermes. They have different way to kind of to talk about this native memory. They associate native memory with each object, so they don't have global counter, for example, for all this memory. So yeah, like, I'm not sure what this return results here supposed to be. If it's just indication like please adjust load by this amount, it would make sense. For example, Hermes engine, but on Hermes I would never able to return overall external memory size unless I have to count it myself somehow.
Right. So you could have just returned nappy okay with the result always being zero.
Right.
Like, yeah, you gave me some information, but I got nothing I can do with it. Like, I guess it's like, yeah. So I guess I'd be happy if we updated this to be a little bit clearer that like this is information. Like you've given us information that the GC or runtime might use, but there's no guarantee that it'll actually use it. Like even it's always like, registering external output will trigger garbage collections more often than it would otherwise. Like it might result in that, right? Like there's not even a guarantee that like you've told V8 that you're 3 bytes bigger doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to do anything, but it could do it more often.
How
Uh,
does V8 know that, for example, if we're saying that we're allocating some amount of memory, how V8 knows which object it's supposed to collect first to release memory if needed?
I don't think it does. It's just that if there's a large amount of memory, external memory, I think it will be more likely to do a garbage collection than if it doesn't think there's external memory. Like,
Mm.
because it may have some smarts to say like, okay, I got this much memory on the heap, and you can make calls through the V8 API, which will allocate memory outside the heap, and it can track some of those. So like it can say like, oh, I know through the thing through you've requested this much memory from me on the heap, and you've requested this much external memory, right? And or maybe it's even like when you create an object, it creates a certain amount of external memory. So it could be doing some tracking to figure out through some heuristic. There's a lot of what I think is a lot of external memory, maybe helping to collect that will free up some space.
Also wonder if it's thread safe, because imagine like a situation you have some object which hold into your kind of native memory, and this object being released on some garbage collector thread, and people supposed to adjust this call this function from different thread or something.
I think it's just it's like an informal number that, yeah, I, in terms of like, I think this is just used as here's memory that's not been allocated by you. Like I've done a malloc on 100 million, you know, usually, I guess it's usually probably not done like that way, but like every time I create I know I create a bunch of these really big objects. Every time I create a big object, I call this, it gets added in. I suspect there's some locking going on behind the scenes, although um, maybe not if this is on like the one event loop. So it can only be called, uh, you can't call it off the thread, right? You got to call it on that one event loop thread when we're running. So maybe that solves the locking issue.
Alright. Yeah, I don't like these functions for many reasons.
It's like an info, like might help you, might not help you one, right? So that's where like I think increasing the number as long as that, now it's like, okay, there's two runtimes we know for sure it works okay on where they're trying to do something, and it doesn't seem to hurt anything to me, right?
Mm.
So if everybody are we okay with just saying, yeah, let's just update this and I can create a PR to suggest a change to the documentation?
Sounds good.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. I'm gonna say, so I'm gonna add my, okay, TM as the function is just providing additional info to the runtime, which it may or may not use. I'll submit a PR to go to the documentation. Okay, so we talked about this one, we talked about that one, and then this one's just a mechanical one. I think, although this one may be the one that's blocked because, oh no, all the checks pass, so we just need to do that. Here. Just do it as we speak. Okay. Any other topics we should chat about this week? Okay, well, if not, thanks for everybody's time, and we will see you all in GitHub and next time.
Same.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Bye.